Welcome to Tales She Told Me, a podcast featuring honest conversation about what it means to be a woman, a mother, and in business. I'm your host, Farrah Haidar. Today, we will be discussing female rivalry, and joining me is Amber Tichenor. Amber has a PhD in IO psychology and is the founder of To Be Coaching and Consulting. A thought leader on topic of women's rivalry, Amber has 20 plus years experience as an organizational change strategy and leadership consultant, where she helped guide businesses through transformational change. Her book, Behind Frenemy Lines, Rising Above Female Rivalry to Be Unstoppable Together, published by Morgan James Publishing, is on sale now. Amber's goal is to promote collaboration over competition, to empower women to find their voice, leave the rivalry behind. I'm sorry, I can't seem to get that right. The rivalry behind, and team up with a community of like minded women who support each other to be unstoppable together. Okay, Amber. So beautiful intro. And as a woman who I grew up in a very female dominated home. I have six sisters. My father was rarely around. I have two brothers as well, but one of them was rarely around because he was so much older than us. Um, so this topic really resonated with me because sometimes when I talk with my sisters, we have such different views about women and the role they play in our lives.
Sure.
So, actually, as a female in general, I think this topic would just resonate with you. So let's be clear, though. How do you define female rivalry?
So my personal definition is female rivalry is one woman minimizing another woman so they both feel small. Female rivalry hurts organizations, social situations, and families. And I often get asked the question, why would both women feel small? And because when I was doing my research, there wasn't an official female rivalry definition. And both women feel small because clearly the woman on the receiving end does not feel good when this ugly type of behavior is projected towards her. But if you flip it, the woman who is issuing that type of behavior, I honestly 100% believe cannot feel good about herself if she is trying to tear somebody down. So I think they both feel small.
Yeah. Do you think it's the woman when they both feel small? Do you think it's the woman who initiates the rivalry, right? Do you think it's her trying to fit into a vision that she's been giving about what women are, or what she should be, and therefore needs the other woman to be in the same box with her?
It could very well be that. There are so many different facets that can contribute to this type of behavior. It could be how you were raised. Maybe you grew up in an environment where you were never enough, or there was a scarcity aspect to that. Maybe you don't feel good about yourself. You have that, I call it your she bully, that kind of sits back here and is constantly talking. Because I'm a firm believer that women who love themselves love other women. So maybe you just inside don't feel good about yourself. Maybe it's the need for control or you think there's not enough room at the top, or again, back to the scarcity. I worked my tail off, so why should I help you out when no one helped me out? There's so many different types of things. It could also just come down to full-blown jealousy or envy. So it depends.
But let me ask you something to follow up on that. Like, those are all things that could exist in male situations as well, right? What
Absolutely.
makes the female part of it so unique or different?
So just to be clear, I did not study the male aspect.
No worries.
I speak, some of my best audiences are males because it is typically not a behavior that they're accustomed to. So when I started doing my research, there wasn't really anything out there on rivalry and so I had to dig a little deeper, and I went back to behaviors of aggression. So when children are born, they are born with the same types of overt aggression. So that's the same until about 7 or 8. And that's when girls begin to develop social intelligence. So with that comes the internal aggression. So that's when you can start to use your tongue or your words, and it's more passive aggressive and more intangible. while little boys are still maybe rough and tumbling, beating each other up, you know, that kind of physical aggression. So at that age is when it pivots a bit. And in the research, I found that tends to be the point when women start to deal with aggression a bit differently than their male counterparts. And it doesn't say that men don't act this way, but again, I didn't study men. Yeah.
Now I get that.
Yeah.
So what are the reasons that it exists? Like what came up in your research?
Like what I'd shared a little bit before. So definitely jealousy,
Mhm.
envy, competition. And I believe competition can be a wonderful thing. I think there is great positive competition. It's when it escalates and gets that edge that it turns ugly, like I want you out of the picture type of thing, or I want what you have type of thing. Again, it could be, I firmly believe a lot of it stems from how you feel internally about yourself. And so if
Mhm.
you're not happy in your own skin, it's going to be very hard to see somebody else be happy. And so that often is a root cause of it. In the working environment, it could be, again, you know, not enough room at the top. Maybe it's a male dominated working environment. And so women, you know, as you go up, there are fewer women. Or I think there's a lot of, I'm a believer of the abundance factor versus the scarcity factor. So if I'm a coach and you're a coach, how we're going to do it and how we're going to come across in the work, you know, that we're helping others with is going to be vastly different due to our personalities, due to, you know, what we specialize in or how we do things. But I still certainly think like we could share and have, you know, maybe I have a client that might not be a great fit for me, but I know you would be wonderful with that person, or maybe my books are full. But I think sometimes people think, well, if I'm sharing, I'm going to lose. So,
Mhm.
you know, it's every situation that I've encountered is different. There are different triggers. It could be how you know, were raised, but often the women who are, again, projecting this behavior, really, there's something they're not happy with in themselves.
Do you think that society's rules, like, I get that. All of that sounds very obviously real and, very authentic, but I'm just kind of trying to wonder. I've seen women be a little more cattier
Yes.
than men.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, like, where that stems from. Is it because of the way society's kind of set up?
Yes.
Like I have an argument with my female friends a lot. Like a lot of them, like, let's say you find someone's cheating, like some celebrities cheating.
Yeah, yeah,
And I always go, I don't know why you guys are blaming the woman he cheated with. Like,
yeah.
it's really him.
It is him.
But a
It
lot of women are like, no, she's the problem. It's like, no.
no, I agree with you. I don't, it's him. He should have held it in, you know, but I think with women, it's easy to point blame at other women. I think society plays a great influence on this. I think popular media makes fun of these types of scenarios. So you'll see it's a cat fight or it's women being dramatic. Look at some of the reality TV shows, you know, like let's say The Bachelor or Bachelorette. Women are pivoted against each other and it's comedy. Even in movies or, you know, I don't watch soap operas, but you see women, you know, there's always one nice and one not nice. And so I think it's the public media fuels the fire to show it as something that's, you know, a comedy or something people enjoy watching. However, when women truly are experiencing this behavior, especially if it's an ongoing long-term behavior, it escalates to a form of bullying. And there are a lot of deep-rooted, deep-seated impacts that come with that. So, and women are taught to kind of shame other women. You know, I think women view themselves in other women. So it's not just my identity. It's, you know, I compare myself to other women. And I think that's just an ongoing thing in our lives that has been
Mhm.
around for a long time.
Well, I actually want to delve a little bit more into something that you said, which
Yeah.
is the impact
Yeah.
on women of female rivalry. And I'll just note here that I've seen it really be detrimental. I don't think I could think of a positive impact of it.
No.
Um, and really lonely for a lot of women.
You coined it. In fact, I just my blog this week was about how lonely women feel and all the research I've done. So I've interviewed hundreds of women, and the common theme amongst all of them is they felt alone. And let me just share too. I experienced this after I wrote my dissertation on it. I wrote my dissertation on it, and then I was in a work environment on a project, and I experienced it, and I didn't even know it was occurring after I'd studied this. So it can be surprising. It can catch you off guard. It's very intangible and passive aggressive. Often the behavior, especially initially, is not done in front of other people. And so you may think, why? She didn't do that to me. No, I'm imagining it. Because why would she do that to me? I didn't do anything to her.
Yep.
So you begin to doubt yourself. And because often the behaviors are fairly intangible or mainly intangible, it's hard to wrap your arms around it to share it with somebody else. So yes, that's where the loneliness comes in. And also the doubt. So your self-esteem will drop. I mean, it affects so many, it can affect you physically, emotionally, mentally. And it happens in families, it happens in social groups, but when it happens at work too, especially if that individual has control over your pay promotion or, trajectory in your career path, there's fear.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I have literally heard women say, "Oh, I would trust a man over a woman any day,"
Yeah.
or "I would rather work for a man
Yes.
than a woman."
Yes.
Um, I've even heard women say, "I don't know if we can have a female president. They're too
Yes.
emotional." And I'm always
Yeah.
floored when
Yeah.
I hear it. Floored. I mean, not that. But some of the reasons they cite are really interesting, but I don't know, has that come up in your research?
Not that one specifically, but I think again, probably you always put what your experiences are into your emotions. So if they've been wronged by another woman, it's going to stick with them. And yes, you brought up a great point. The women, it breaks my heart. I've had women tell me, I have no female friends. I don't know how to make friends. I don't trust women. I will never work for another female again. I will never work on an all-female team again. And I'm like, that's tragic. We're half the population. And I'm not belittling what occurred to these women, but you have to deal with it. So in my mind, if women are saying these types of comments, like what you said and what I've just mentioned, I don't think they've processed or gotten through and coped with what they went through, because there are women that uplift and empower. And, sometimes it takes work to find. I mean, you date when you find your significant other. So I'm a believer that you can date to find your friendships or the right networking groups. And if it's not a great fit at first, then try again. There's lots of resources and things out there. But to find your true group or people or circle or tribe, whatever you call it, sometimes it will take work, but it's worth it in the long run.
I have to tell you, so I just talking about that because that's really touches home for me. So
Yeah.
I moved when I was almost 40. I moved from Boston to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I thought the move wouldn't be that bad because I had moved a lot in my life.
Yeah.
When I was 20 something, I moved from California to Boston. Before that, it was Lebanon. Like I
Yeah.
had moved a lot. So I just didn't think I'd say, oh, it's like a year and a half of adjustment. And I moved into Atlanta's a little different. Like a lot of us are expats.
Yeah.
What I call like if
Yeah.
you find someone who's actually from Georgia, it's like, oh my God, there's a unicorn, right? So it's and we're kind of put in these neighborhoods where you get in and you meet people and all that. And I had a lot of trouble. I
Yeah.
had a lot of trouble, especially with other women.
Yeah.
And some of it I will put down to my northern self being in a Southern environment and not understanding.
can relate to that. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm originally from Seattle, so yes, I can definitely relate. But
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, and I should have known because I had a Southern friend tell me once when I was still in Boston. She said, "Oh, honey, like you Yankees think we're," she was, let me get it
yeah.
exactly right. She's like, "You Yankees, you think just because we're nice to you, we're your friend. Honey, I'm not your friend until I invite you over to dinner." And
Oh,
I should have kept that in mind. And I didn't.
but
Yep.
it's
So
yes,
shame on me, but I had a lot of trouble, especially with a lot of females. And I ended up honestly in a really bad place because I was used to having female
yes,
companionship. I grew up with six sisters. I've always had female friends. Um, I was always such an advocate for females. So I ended up in a really, really bad place. And finally I said, enough is enough. And I did kind of what you said. I went and I speed dated women.
yeah,
I did. And I hate to put it that way, but I did. I would find women that I had common interest in.
yeah,
I'd invite them out to coffee one time, and that was
yes,
my rule.
yes,
One time.
yes,
If they reciprocated, I would reciprocate. If
yeah,
they did not, it was done.
yeah,
Many blessings to you. Goodbye. Right?
yeah.
And it worked. It actually did work. And I actually have found some wonderfully beautiful friends. And I always try to be very open to new people coming because I was like, God, I've been there.
Yeah. Well, it's
um,
hard. I've been in the same situation. I mean, I went from Seattle to DC to Virginia, and it's just the start of the South. But I know when we moved into our neighborhood, at first I was just meeting friends through my children. It was the moms of,
mhm,
and I'm like, well, this is great, but they're not, you're thrown into situations that might not always be who you would naturally seek out. But it took a long time. It's harder, I think, to make adult friends as you get a bit older, and
mhm.
it can be lonely. So I feel for you. I'm glad you did the dating. It feels weird to say that, but we do it for our significant others, so why not with friends? It makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think I just really came to the conclusion that it was really essential for me. I had been hurt, so I just kind of coupled, like kind of like a turtle. I went into my shell and made my little nest, but got really dark in there.
Yeah.
I wanted to poke out of it. So moving on to that, one of the things I have a couple of different ways. I have a couple of different questions for you, but one of the things that we talk about a little bit is or that I've been thinking about is that there's been a real shift I feel, over the past generations. Like when I look at I have 20 something nieces and nephews. And when I look at them, and then I look at my daughter's generation, my daughter's about 13 now, female, it seems there's a real shift in the way we talk about women and all that. Having said that, I tend to raise kind kids.
Yes.
And there's sometimes a disadvantage to that, you
Yes.
know?
Because
So,
mhm.
how can we raise, I guess my question is, how can we raise kinder women and how do we teach them how to deal with rivalry that still exists?
So I hear you because my daughter is turning 14 on Sunday. So
Oh my
we're
God, it's so rough.
same age group.
Yep.
Yes. And then my son is 12. So I'm right there in the thick of middle school. Like, oh Lord. But like you, we are raising kind people and includers, but I also think it's so very important to raise individuals where they can say, I have boundaries. So
Mhm.
you don't want them to be so nice and so kind that they're being stomped on.
Yep.
And unfortunately, you have to raise these issues. So I remember I've studied this topic for a long time when my daughter was in kindergarten. She came home and I naively was thinking, I have until about probably late grade school, middle school before these behaviors began occurring. No, ma'am. She was telling me some of the stuff that was happening on the playground, and I was like, oh my God, we're already in the thick of it. But my thought is, at that age, it is not intrinsic within those little people. It is a learned behavior. So it was something they were mirroring and seeing in their own lives. So we talk about being kind and including, and I say, not everybody's going to be your BFF, but you can include, and you can make sure that somebody doesn't feel left out, because that's a horrible feeling. But also, when these mean behaviors start occurring for boys or girls, you have to be aware of it. So what you have control over only all the time is your own behavior. You have no control over what someone does to you, or how they do it, or how it makes you feel, but you certainly have control in how you respond to it. So you either walk away, or you just say, hey, you're not treating me the way I treat you. You're not my friend. You don't have to be ugly, but you also don't have to continue to have that relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And at this age, I know, it's so hard, because everybody wants to be accepted and fit in, because that's the age of the adolescence. And then all the other crazy hormones and feelings, and crying one minute and laughing the next. But we just
So tough.
We just have constant conversations about it. And I know they tune me out because I'm Mom, but
they don't really. They're still listening. They just, yeah.
They just act like they're bored, and they know better than Mom or whatever, but it's the way of the age. But yeah, you can still be kind, but you can walk away, and you don't have to be friends with somebody who's not nice to you.
Yeah, we talk, it's funny because my daughter and I have a lot of conversations, and some of the things that I've pointed out to her about is that you can have, so one of the things she always throws at me, because I tell her, like, this person has been mean to you time and time and time again. Why are you expecting a different behavior at this point?
Tiger doesn't choose his stripes, or zebra, whatever.
And she's like, well, I find it hard to say no, because you always tell me you should treat people like you want to be treated. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, very good point. But here's the deal, my daughter. There's a difference between having a standard and an expectation.
Exactly. Right? I love
you. You have a standard for your friends.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
But to expect this person to continue to meet that standard is very different.
Yes. And if they're not,
you can say bye. Like, I don't know why they feel like in middle school, they feel like they can't say no. I'm like,
they really do. And I don't know if it's because they're thrown together with different classes, and then I've encouraged my kiddos is also like, have different friend groups. It's in a reprieve. So you have your school group, you might have the sports group, you might have the neighborhood group, whatever, but that makes it where you're not together so much that you're only reliant on that specific group. But what you mentioned about the standard versus expectation is gold, because if somebody is showing, if it makes you feel bad inside, you get that gut feeling that's yucky, then that you got to listen to that. You have to listen to what your body is telling you. Even if your mind or heart says something else, they are not your true friend if they're treating you that way.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And now that we've talked kind of about younger women, I also wanted to touch base on race and class.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you saw any differences in female rivalry when it came to race and class.
It's interesting you say that, because that's something I'm starting to branch out and do more research with. So I've seen bits, but I don't have, and I'm partnering with somebody in the Middle East right now to collect.
Where in the Middle East?
In Kuwait.
Kuwait. I'm Lebanese originally. I lived in Lebanon for a long time.
And I lived in Saudi for a long time, for a year, I should say, not a long time, but so I'm familiar with the Middle Eastern culture, but anyhow, we can talk on the side about that. But I'm trying to dive into some of the different cultures. And so I don't have specific research for it, but I do know, like, one woman is standing out that I interviewed that came from a Latina culture. And that culture, those women are strong and they're fierce, and they can tear down as quickly as they can pick you up. So the woman that I interviewed in that particular instance, she was really more focused on the family rivalry because it was much harder for her than any friendship rivalry ever was. And it was mainly between her mom. But her mom came from a big family of mainly all women.
Mhm.
And she saw it amongst the sisters. So, you might have stories to tell coming from, if you have mainly females in your family too. But I think there is something there. And I did a survey last year with African American women, and there was, I'm still sorting through that data, but yes, amongst different women of color, it was interesting to me what they were sharing about, lightness versus darkness of skin, hair, straighter versus curly. And it became a competitive or, a rivalry type of thing. So yeah, I believe it's out there. I think that's just a deeper study.
I would be fascinated with the results because just coming from, I grew up in Lebanon,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting to me because Middle Eastern culture, which you say you're familiar with, is very interesting because women spend a lot of time together, a
Yeah.
lot in Middle Eastern country. We're segregated often.
Yep.
My mom used to hold these coffee dates, and these women would come dressed up to the nines. I mean,
I was amazed at how these women dress. It's fascinating.
I know, like dressed up to the nines. There are no men there. Like they are not there to impress men, right? It dressed up to the nines, and it would be this camaraderie, da da da. But then there would be a competitive angle in terms of, like, let's say both of your, like, a guy is interested in two of your daughters or something like that, and then it suddenly becomes like they're
Oh,
at each other's throat. All the camaraderie is suddenly gone, and I think that's what's kind of um encouraged. Like even my sister who was widowed, like she was like, I went from being everyone's friend and darling to the minute I was widowed, I was suddenly a threat and nobody wanted to talk to me. And
that's
I was just like, that's like crazy pants.
awful. It's awful. That's when you need your support system the most.
Mhm. Now she found it in her sisters. I do have to say, because my sisters might be listening to this.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but they for the most part, my sisters and I have not been really rival. But I think that's because each one of us just ended up being. We all had so many like our unique roles
Yeah.
in the family.
Yeah.
Mostly because my parents had 9 kids, so that my eldest siblings took over a lot of the caretaking, right?
Yeah.
So there wasn't a ton of rivalry, but it still was. It did. I would say it still did crop up sometimes, and the problem with roles is they might make things easier, but then you can never get out of them.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's natural in any family to have some sort of a sibling rivalry, whether male or female. You know what I mean? I think it
Mhm.
hits the hardcore, truly ugly that's when it's branches off to the not nice behavior. Yeah.
But can I ask you, like, the stereotype is that females are relationship driven, right?
Yeah.
That's the stereotype. So why do we struggle so much with friendship? That's my question.
It's a love-hate thing. So women need each other. There is I have this in my book. I don't know if I will get it right. There are studies that show that when women are around other women, you get a serotonin surge. And women like it, you look at the hunter-gatherer days. So we've evolved as women, men would go hunt, women would stay together and help raise each other's children. So now we are in a very busy culture. It's harder to get together with your friends. It's harder, but we need each other. On the other hand, you brought up a good point, like when your mom would do the coffee talks and it's all women coming in together and they're checking each other out and looking what each other is wearing. Well, that's still common today. It's like, oh, she has nicer shoes on than I do, or she's driving a better car. There's always a tit for a tat. And I'm generalizing, but women view themselves in comparisons with other women. And I just think that's part of our society, whether we like it or not. Yet you'll have women that will do their own thing and say nasty things, yet then on the flip side, they want unconditional support for their female friends.
Mm.
So it's kind of like it butts heads sometimes. And so,
Mhm.
if you have friend groups, which you mentioned, you now have great groups where you're living. I know my group of friends that I have here or other groups, like I know they're not talking about me when I get up from the table. I know,
Yeah.
in fact, if I'm gone, they're raising me up. And so I think that's a difference too, like of who you're hanging out with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a difference. And I have to say that I've come as I've grown older
Yeah.
to believe in what I call a freer love, which means to me a love that's without expectation. I think expectation
Yeah.
ruins a lot of friendships, especially when you're older,
Yes.
you know? Um, okay, well, it's been fascinating, I'm sure, and I cannot wait to see what you come up with race and class. But I do have this question that I
Yes.
ask of all my my guests, and it is, what is a weird habit or ritual you have that makes your life more joyful?
So I don't know that it's weird, but I get so excited, and my kids wouldn't let me do it early, but I love it when, we're in the holiday season now. I'm
Mhm.
not sure when this will air, but I like to blast the Christmas music in the car. And they're like, no, mom, it's not. So I would play it in the car. I think I started mid-November, even a little
Mhm.
earlier this year, and they would get in the car and say, no, you cannot turn it on until after Thanksgiving. So they would switch the station. But there's something about this time of year and playing holiday music that it makes me happy.
Yeah.
So
And if it makes you happy, where's the harm in that, right? As
exactly.
Cheryl Crow said, if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad.
It can't be that bad. It's a little cheesy, but it's not that bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Amber, I could talk about this for hours, but we do have to go. It was a pleasure having you. And if you're out there listening and you'd like to hear more from Amber, you can check out her website at tobecoachingandconsulting.com, where she's offering a free download that answers the question, why good women walk? Or follow her on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. As always, all links in the show notes below. I'd love to hear from you about this episode. How have you experienced female rivalry in your life? Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Farrah Haidar. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll get notified when a next episode is available. Also, I'm giving away a PDF of some of the best quotes we've had on the show, beautifully designed to print and journal your thoughts. Email me at farrah@farrahhaidar.com and title it Quotes. Talk to you soon. Till then, chase your happy.